From Hollywood to politics, the past few years have seen an unprecedented number of women shining a light on sexism in their communities. But despite this, new figures from the Global Institute for Women's Leadership, you remember of that, Piers?
I fully support their findings.
Reveal half of Britons think there are more advantages to being a man in today's society.
Of course, we've got
it easy.
Are they the
men? Is that the half?
We've got it easy. So ahead of International Women's Day on Friday, we're bringing together two of the best-known feminists, probably of all time, activist and actor Rose McGowan and former Australian Prime Minister Gillard, who's chair of the Global Institute for Women's Leadership at King's College London. Well, what a veritable explosion of feminist power we have before us.
And
I may say so, looking like a pair of feminist power icons. Good morning to both of you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Can we start? What does International Women's Day mean? To you, were you Australia's first woman Prime Minister?
Yes, I was. So to date, only female Prime Minister of Australia.
In a country that many people for a long time presumed was kind of the epitome of misogyny and sexism, how did you find leading Australia, and how far has the world come, do you think, in terms of equality and feminism?
Well, I think a little harsh on my country, because I think there are issues for women in politics right around the world, and leading women in all industries, including the creative arts and Hollywood, as Rose knows only too well. For me, there was far too much airtime taken by irrelevant issues about gender, what I was wearing, the fact I don't have kids, you know, my body shape, which got a fair bit of commentary from my earlobes to everything else. And
more than a man would get.
Oh, a lot more than a man would get. And in addition to that, there's a series of stereotypes about women who are leaders. People easily conclude that they're not very likeable, that they're very hard-boiled, they're very ruthless.
What if they're sometimes not very likeable or are hard-boiled?
Because there were accusations that were thrown, for instance, at Hillary Clinton.
I mean, Margaret Thatcher wasn't particularly likeable, and she was very hard-boiled, but I thought she was a terrific leader for a large part of her tenure. Hillary Clinton, I don't think is particularly likeable. I think she's quite hard-boiled, but the public didn't really resonate with her in a way that allowed her to win. So you can be a woman and be hard-boiled and dislikable.
Absolutely, of course. I mean, I think as a percentage, there are as many nasty, unlikable men as there are nasty, unlikable women. What we shouldn't do is we shouldn't look at a woman leader and put a stereotype on her and say, I bet she's really, not a nice person, a nasty person. We should get to know her and assess her and evaluate her leadership, but not through the prism of gender.
The trouble is that nasty and unlikable are not necessarily bad things for a man to be, whereas they're thrown at women as detriments. You know, we can have nasty, unlikable men and they still get to be in positions of great power.
That's true, and I think there's a difference between being the boss and being seen as bossy, and I think women are much more likely to be characterised as bossy rather than looked at as the boss.
I hear this debate, Rose, and it slightly frustrates me because I get criticised all the time for the way I look. I get fat-shamed on national TV. I get fat-shamed in the papers today. I get ridiculed for ties, for this, for that, for my hair, whatever. I think it happens to men a lot. It's just that we don't care as much. Women, I think, react a little, if I may put this out there as a suggestion, that women perhaps are more sensitive to that kind of criticism than men. Men do get a lot of it.
I think men do not get as much of it, and I'll tell you why. You're a public figure, and so you're out there, and public figures, as we know, if you're on TV, if you dare to be in the box, you it's open season on you. But I would say probably the man walking down the street doesn't have it as much in that way. So I think there is truth, certainly, when it comes to being a public figure. I think when it's a private citizen, it might be a bit skewed.
I had a really interesting random encounter with Ariana Grande, currently the #1 pop star in the world. #1, 2 and 3 in the American Billboard chart, which is the first time any solo artist, male or female, has ever achieved that. Only the Beatles have done it as a group. So we had this we bumped into each other in a restaurant, and she wanted to take me to task over comments I'd made about another group called Little Mix, who had done a naked picture with abusive words on their body, which they said this was about empowering young women who get criticised for how they look. And I thought, you're just using nudity to do this, and I was a bit cynical about it. Ariana sat down with me and she said one really interesting thing, in a very interesting conversation for 2 hours we sat there. And she said to me, you know, the key thing she believed about feminism and the battle for equality and everything that's going on, International Women's Day and so on, was that women needed to bring men with them. And Annie Lennox said the same thing to me on this show. And I was really struck by that. I really feel that when the debate strays into man denigration or man hating, it puts off a lot of guys. Whereas actually, if women go, look, we want fairness and equality, we want you to come with us, we want you to be part of this journey, for want of a better word, I think that's a much better sales pitch to make.
Right. Well, I never made a sales pitch that was otherwise, Piers.
Right.
But
no, I agree.
For me, in my instance, you know, I've been asked, is what you do for women? And I say, you know, in the abstract, it's actually for men, because if that is the seat of power, then we need to fix that, because they get stolen so young. I talk about this in my book, Brave. I talk about how they get stolen and they get put into this box, and it is hard. It is hard to be a man, and it comes with a lot of different, you know, a whole different arsenal of strengths and weaknesses that we, you know, don't have. But if we can start seeing each other as human first before we're gender, I think we might actually have.
I had a problem with the Gillette commercial recently. I don't know if you're both aware of it. But Gillette came out having had this whole thing, the best a man can be. It was always, you know, guys with their sons, guys with their dads. It was pretty, you know, like celebration of masculinity. Now Gillette has gone the complete opposite way. Basically, we're all a problem. This masculinity now is a stick to beat us with. Well, actually, I don't think most guys are like that. And we don't all need re-educating. And actually, some bad guys do. And the good guys think the same thing as women do about it.
Well, but isn't it that we're in a journey about what masculinity is? And this actually comes out of the research that we did with Ipsos Mori that you referred to earlier. People were asked, is a man staying home caring for kids something that makes him less of a man? And 81% of British men disagreed with that, 81%. So, you know, we've got a change in masculinity. I think if you'd asked that polling question 40 or 50 years ago, people would have said, no, men go to work, men are breadwinners, they don't stay home with the kids. So the concept of what it is to be a man is evolving, it's changing, and I think in a way, and Rose is absolutely right, that ultimately empowers men as well as women. Because why does anybody want to be in a box that says you can only be a good person if you do these 1, 2, 3 things? You can be a good person if you do these 10, 20, 100
and
things.
also, hasn't the scale with the Gillette ad and things like it, you know, the scales have been so tipped for so long, it's just literally about furthering a conversation, having an intellectual conversation, having discourse, because that's how we're going to grow. When you're little, your legs hurt, but you got taller. And that's growth.
See, I always say, when people say to me, what's Rose McGowan like? You know, actually, you're nowhere near as aggressive or hostile as people perceive you to be. I've had great conversations with you.
I've had great conversations with you. No, it's definitely a media thing on my case. If anyone reads my book, you can see that I'm not... I dislike injustice.
You're not a lunatic, radical feminist.
I'm not, actually.
You're not.
Then when they asked me for radical feminism in your thing, and I said, you know, I actually don't know any.
No, quite.
I don't know.
I've met a few, trust me. Julie,
But Piers, isn't that part of the stereotyping?
Exactly.
That if a woman lifts her voice, you know, bravely...
I've been so
and you know, shines a light on things that need to be discussed.
She's aggressive rather than assertive.
Hard things.
It is, but
it's easy to put a label that says man-hating, aggressive, rather than listening to the message.
But in the way that I accept there are some men who are toxically masculine and go way too far that way, I think there are radical feminists who also cause a lot of damage because they're basically man-hating and it doesn't help anybody.
But I would say this, we actually publish research at the Global Institute for Women's Leadership that analysed the newspapers in the first 2 weeks after Margaret Thatcher became Prime Minister way back when, in 1979, and the first 2 weeks of Theresa May's Prime Ministership, and the coverage is more gendered now than it was back then. Now, I don't think that that's because stereotypes of women's roles have gone backwards. I think it's because media mores have changed, and so now people will say, as they did say about me, she's got a, you know, a fat ass, or, you know, look at that jacket, or, you know, look at those cankles. You know, people will put that in the newspapers.
Well, I remember the Daily Mail front page when Nicola Sturgeon and Theresa May had met for talks, two powerful British leaders, and the photograph was, never mind Brexit, who won Lexit, as in who won the best legs
but let me,
out of both of those
permission to say something about that, ladies. Theresa
I think
May,
it would be hard to say no to permission
Theresa
to
May,
say
though,
something from you.
I would throw back this. Theresa May has absolutely, deliberately made her legs and her heels a key selling point for her brand.
She just dresses well.
No, she absolutely has done it deliberately.
She just wears skirts.
No,
nice
no.
That would have become something
That
that was
would become
talked
a
about.
huge
She'd be a
It would
lot more
a huge
interesting
thing.
to me if she did.
Well,
I think she should dress like me.
Yes. If Theresa May came out like that and said, I'm going to go to see the EU today wearing this, and I'm not going to leave till I've kicked their butts all over
think
Europe.
she
I'd be like, get in there, girl.
Or even if you used an alternative word for butt that Julia Gillard just used.
Yeah, exactly.
are you not supposed to say that on British morning TV?
The thing is, you can't say arse on British television unless you're talking about me. That's the rule.
But somehow
There's
we've
only
just
one
used
big
it
arse
twice.
on this show, and it's not you.